No, I was teasing.
I know you were.
We're ready.
All right. It's 5:30, and we'll call our meeting to order this Monday, July 22nd. I have the wrong sheet here.
Wrong week.
I did. There we are. This is right. Way to start, huh? Can I get a roll call, Carl, for attendance?
Councilmember Remley.
Here.
Ronayne.
Here.
Lunsman.
Here.
Rife. Here. Johnson.
Here.
Lunsness.
Here.
Olson.
Here.
Rux.
Here.
Mayor Schoeneman.
Here. Please stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can I get a motion to approve the minutes of the July 15th meeting?
So moved. Second.
Got it. Motion from Bunceness and a second from Rux. Can I get a roll call on that, Carl?
Councilmember Remley.
Aye.
Ronayne.
Aye.
Lunsman.
Aye.
Rife. Johnson.
Aye.
Lunsness.
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Rux.
Aye.
Mayor Schoeneman.
Aye. Motion passes. Open forum. We've got one guest speaker. Gilbert, I see that you're here. The first order of business will be to read on the ordinance as it stands. So why don't we plan to have you come speak at that point, if that's all right? We'll move to old business. The first order of business is the second reading of ordinance prohibiting parking on a street within 5 feet of a driveway. Brett, a little bit of background on that.
Actually, I'll have somebody who deals with that, either Robin or the city attorney.
Fair enough. I'll have you, Ron. Sorry about that, Brett.
That's all right. Good.
This is a possible second reading, depending on a motion by the council for reading of a amendment to the driveway ordinance that currently prohibits parking in front of a driveway. This would put a 5-foot encroachment radius around each side of the driveway as it intersects with the curb or the roadway edge line if there is no curb.
Moved. Second.
Got a motion from Lunsman, a second from Bunceness for the second reading.
Remley.
Second, our motion from Remley, second from, boy, it's a rough one here today, guys. Apologize to all
Lisa
of
made
us,
that
so
mistake all the time, so don't worry about it.
Sometimes we
we
all
only
sound
have the
alike.
radio voice in the room. So Gilbert, why don't we give you the floor to start with? We had quite a lengthy discussion last week, and I expect there will be a few things to add, so go ahead and make your way to the microphone there, if you would.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and everybody else involved. Thank you, Mr. Mark Remley, for inviting me. This came about because of a lot of frustration during this past winter. I live on, my wife and I both live on 809 4th Avenue Northeast, and so we have parking on both sides of our street. It's a two-way street, and what we experienced was neighbors that parked right up to the edge of our single drive. It's just a single driveway that all street parking. And the frustration came when we wanted to back out or enter our driveway when they were that close to our driveway. Either we couldn't do it or it was a near miss trying to enter because there's lack of turning radius when that happens. And the dimension of my driveway is approximately 12 foot wide. And so with my pickup truck, there's days I couldn't drive in or back out of my driveway. And with the snow that built up on the curbs and the street parking began to move in towards the center of the street, if somebody was parked on the opposite side of our street is when we experienced a lot of frustration. Sometimes it got to the point where I didn't even attempt to park my pickup in the driveway so that if my wife had to go to work, I would take her to work because we couldn't get out of our driveway with her car. So that was the frustration we experienced. And secondly, it was a safety issue for us. When we began to back out, we had a hard time seeing the traffic that would go by. And so there was an issue there where there was almost an accident a couple times. And so that's another thing that brought us to this place, to try and see if we could work out something there with encroachment upon our private drive. And I know maybe not everybody has experienced the same frustration. If you have a double drive, it may be different. But and since that time, since the winter, we have paid attention, just driving around town, wherever we go. We've watched the residential areas and how people park. And 95 to 99% of the time, we noticed that people were respecting other people's driveways. They were parking within a 5-foot range of the edge of the driveway. And it was just common courtesy to see that, and it really made me feel good that for the most part, the residents of Aberdeen were understanding that there is a reason to just park a little bit back from the edge of a driveway, and it's, to me, respectful to allow the residents of that private driveway to enter and exit without frustration. And so why buy a home with a private drive when you can't use it, especially in the wintertime? Why buy a home with a private drive if it's accident prone when you begin to back out of it? So those are our frustrations. I also noticed, in fact, I did it today. I drove down by Northern State, and the residents north of the university, within 1 block area of the university, there's a lot of old yellow paint on all of the private drives. That's a 5-foot setback. Now, a lot of that paint has disappeared. A lot of new curbing has been put in. But that tells me there was a problem. And what that tells me is we can't ignore that people have private drives, and we need to respect that. And we also need to understand that this issue is nothing new. I'm sure this city has probably been very respectful to their neighbors. But there are those that don't respect a private drive. And that's why I came today to talk about that. And I'm not trying to cause problems. And I told Councilman Mark Remley, I said, if nothing else, I mean, if it's just an ordinance where, if there's an issue and the homeowner, has the frustration, we can call the police and something can be done. We tried that, nothing could be done. So here we are today. And so if everybody likes somebody parking to the edge of the driveway, that's fine with me. I don't think it should be forced upon everyone. But if on demand, if there's a situation where law enforcement has to intervene, I think it should be made possible.
And,
Mark, go ahead.
yeah, didn't you try to work out a deal with your neighbor?
Yes, I did. It was not a doable situation. We got, they were renters. We actually got the landlord involved as well. And there was just total disrespect. I'm not going to go into details of some of the other things that happened. This encroachment upon our driveway was minor, but other things happened in that process, and I'm not going to go any further than that.
Has any other council member have a question for Gilbert? So, Robin, we had talked a little bit about the painted private curbs or curbs next to private drives, and it sounds like there was a little bit of a process there for your guys' department to have done that. I'm not familiar with the ones north of NSU, but it sounded like at least one that was near the Memorial Suites was painted. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
There have been a number of requests over the years. One that I can think of is near the tennis courts to the east side of NSU. We've had a couple that go kind of to the east by the new dorm. And some of those areas you end up with just a lot of students or a lot of activity that really made it difficult to get in and out of these narrow driveways. So upon request, a lot of times through the police department, they've made that request on somebody's behalf. We have gone out and painted those out.
Simmons Elementary.
Simmons Elementary, there are a number of them, and that was primarily due to staff parking. It was a Monday through Friday issue, and they didn't have adequate parking lots, or it may have been while Simmons Middle, as an example, was being rebuilt, and they lost their parking entirely. So you had a lot of extra parking along Third Street there.
So people were parking in front of the drive entrances themselves, or they were just encroaching too close?
No, it was close to no, they weren't parking in front of, but they were parking near those driveways, and a lot of those are narrower driveway areas.
Go ahead.
So even south of Simmons Elementary on Third Avenue, we painted those areas for the fact that Simmons Middle School is under construction. That looks a little bit fresher than that.
Well, and some of those have continued to be painted that way, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is there a circumstance without changing a rule that's on the books where Mr. Vilhauer's situation could be handled like that? Or what was kind of the criteria that those other situations face?
Well, normally it's an area where there's just an awful lot of parking that takes place, and we would want to try to make sure that we could provide some buffer for those driveways. But normally it would be in an area where you had a lot of parking going on, a neighborhood that had a lot of issues. But there again, it was a case-by-case basis. We kind of took a look at each one of them individually and tried to make a decision to see if we could help out.
Sure. So in those cases, somebody called the police, and the police contacted your department, and you kind of
Typically,
made
yes.
that discussion. Are there other, I guess, I had a lot of discussions. I'm a lot more famous than I was 1 week ago because I've been in the newspaper twice now on this topic, and I'm on the television tonight, so if we get out of here soon enough, we'll all be able to see. So there's definitely a lot of enthusiasm on the topic, and a lot of people have contributed their opinions, on this topic. So I'm wondering if beyond the discussion that we had last week, does anyone have anything to contribute? Mark? Oh, Mr. Ronay?
I would have a question for Robin, if I could. But what was the effect when if all you're doing is putting a little paint down, that doesn't really make it illegal to park there, I take it?
Well, if it's painted yellow, I believe it is enforceable by police to have, that's a no parking zone.
The city
Who's saying that? Is it Clint? Are you saying that?
Yeah, because it's marked yellow, that's in the standard of transportation.
All you gotta do is get a bucket of yellow paint.
Yeah, done deal.
Well, the city engineer does have the authority to identify no parking areas, and these are done under his authority, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, problem solved. Then I've got one other question for Robin. Would Mr. Billhauer's situation, would that justify the city engineering department putting little yellow paint down there?
We would certainly take a look at it to make sure that it appeared that it was maybe and each situation is different. So we'd want to do a little bit of checking before we painted stuff up. But sure, it would be something we would sure look at and consider.
If that type of situation, like Mr. Vilhauer, let's say, is morning and night, morning because then the person leaves for work, comes back at night, and has a similar situation as the person who would make the complaint, you'd never see that, right? I mean, to you would be like, there's no car ever parked there. Why is he asking for
No, it would be a simple matter of them telling us. I go check on stuff at 8, 10 o'clock at night if I have to. Sure.
Okay.
We would be willing to go out and take a look.
Because, I fielded some calls, and I think there is some misinformation on this, because a lot of people were thinking that, well, I can't park in front of my own driveway, and it's like, well, you're not going to call in a complaint on yourself. And I think that's what people don't realize. This is usually after you've gone through every step to try and remedy the situation in a neighborly fashion, that then this is an option. I talked to a person today who lives across the street from apartments. People park in front of her mailbox. She doesn't get her mail because they can't get to her mailbox. And she's tried calling the landlord. She's gone over and knocked on the people's doors, and she's gotten no response. And there's, again, not much recourse for her.
Sure. And I talked to that same lady. In fact, I went over to her house, but the 5 foot wouldn't even solve her problem because the mailbox was approximately 5 foot from the edge of that driveway. And so she would have needed a much larger space than that for a mailman to drive up on her
But a
sidewalk.
5 foot would at least give a little bit of relief. And I'm not even saying 5 feet. I'm not even saying I'm sold on the 5 feet. But at the same point, I think that and it is unfortunate that we have to think about this stuff. But again, we do a lot of things because it may seem, I take it from a safety standpoint. If I had 5 feet at the end of my driveway to see a kid riding on their bike, which kids ride their bikes on my street going to the pool. I have joggers going to the bike path. I have walkers. If a car was parked in the end of my driveway, as well as numerous driveways through town, would you see them, especially if it's a bigger truck? And that's the point I'm taking on this, is that it's not so much, are we eliminating parking? I don't think so, because this is only on a complaint basis, and I think that if someone wanted to call and complain, it'd be relative pretty quickly that this person is just nitpicking to nitpick. But if I remember correctly, this is only for residential districts?
It specifies both commercial and private residential drives.
I just saw it under the residential parking, but that's where I'm sitting on this. Is I'm not even saying I'm at the 5 feet. If we thought 3 feet was enough, that's fine. But for me, it's a safety aspect on being able to see someone who's riding a bike
Sure.
or walking.
Mike?
Well, I'm gonna oppose this again. I just don't feel that this is a necessary regulation that we have to put in place. If you go out to our parking lots in our shopping areas, them are 10-foot spaces, and you're very close. And you have to be very careful when you're parking out. People are walking, people are riding bikes, whatever. You just need to be careful, use safety in mind. And it's no different in the downtown area when you're backing out. It's difficult, you can't see, so you're just very careful. Snow removal happens in every neighborhood. It obscures visibility, particularly this year that we had. We're not going to ask Public Works to keep the snow 10 feet back from our driveways. We just can't do that sort of thing. And I mean, if we're able to paint, Public Works can paint a driveway to prohibit parking in a particular situation, I think that's a solution, so we don't have to create an ordinance for this.
Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead.
Yeah, we had a discussion today concerning the painting, and that might work 6 months out of the year or 8 months out of the year, but when the snow hits, that's all gonna get covered up. And that's when the problem and the issues are in the wintertime, is the, turning radius when the parking on the opposite side of the street that I live on starts to move in. And then even the people that park on our side of the street, they're parking out in the street further. And so you don't have that turning radius. And I don't know what's so complicated about a turning radius. Every intersection has it. Alley has to have it. There's setbacks on an alley, and a private drive is no different. And
I don't think
the
that
snow's going to cover up the yellow paint, and the city's going to look like crap after that paint starts to peel off, and somebody's got to go around, repaint and repaint and repaint. And that's a maintenance issue. Just get the ordinance where it belongs, and you don't have to deal with it again. It'll come up again in the future, trust me.
I don't think that anyone doesn't feel bad for your situation. And when you and I spoke earlier, I really took to heart kind of some of the difficulties that you were having with your neighbor. And, it's a tough situation. I think we all kind of feel bad for you. I reached out on social media and got about 250 total responses, and a majority of them were opposed to this. And that was my natural inclination, because it does feel like it's going to be somewhat difficult to enforce. And especially after we talked to Robin, it sounded like some people kind of had a little bit of a workaround. It's not perfect. It's not going to be perfect. And, anytime that a new person comes from outside of town, they aren't going to know that this thing exists. So they're going to park potentially right up to the curb. There's a lot of congestion. I think that if truly we're only selectively enforcing this anyways, I think that's already kind of a sketchy type of a situation. So, does anyone else have, David?
So I don't think we're selectively enforcing this. Remember, this is on complaint basis. We got complaints in the northern area. We got complaints in the Simmons Elementary area. and we did something about it. And your comparison, Mike, to parking lots, that there is no comparison. If you look at a parking lot, what he's experiencing is that you would be parked and you would have another car that would come in and sit there so you can't get out of your parking spot. That's what he's experiencing.
Right.
So how are we going to give him relief? I don't think that this is something that you can place on Robin to make 1, 2, 3 decisions individually. This ordinance solves it, and it is not, this is what this body is here for, is to help people, okay? It's to help people in situations. For instance, we just passed a nuisance ordinance. That nuisance ordinance, it was an amendment to the nuisance ordinance, took into consideration something that we're seeing more often today than we ever have in the past, and that is people parking on their grass in their front yard without a hard surface. Never saw that in the past, not a lot, but it's something that's become more popular, so we're dealing with it. This is something that it's been around, obviously. So, this idea that we want to hold regulation down or something in that order, come on. If you want to talk regulation, go to the state level and go to the federal level. There's plenty of it to talk about. In the city here, we do things to help people. And we get a ton of regulation forced down our throat every year. Wastewater, water, there might be some good things there because we don't have some issues. But this is minor. We can help an individual, and we probably will help more individuals than you think we will. So I'm here. I'm supporting this, and I ask you to support it because it's complaint basis. The individual's going to have to call in and tell us they have an issue. I had an email, my only contact with anyone talking about this, and he was concerned that if he went to his father's house and he parked too close to the driveway, that we were going to ticket him. It's his father. I guess if his father doesn't like him, he might have a problem. But this is easy. Let's help the guy out.
Could the same be said, though, about handicapped spots? Like, somebody has to call those in for them to be enforced. Policemen don't just drive around looking for people to be parked in handicapped spots to find. So I have a little bit of a more challenging stance with it. I heard from a lot of people that were just ideologically opposed and had differences.
Well, we had a lot of response to the nuisance ordinance also on the city webpage. And when you read through that, there was a lot of misinformation that was occurring. So I haven't looked at your webpage, your Facebook page, but I can guess, I would bet there's a lot of misinformation that's going on because we experienced it through the nuisance ordinance.
Well, this was pretty cut and dry because it was just the addition of language on the one bullet.
Yeah.
But it's complaint basis.
Yeah. And
Do they understand what complaint basis is?
I think the misconception was some people I talked to thought that the police officers were going to drive around residential areas ticketing people who are within 5 feet of their driveway and measure them. And that's not what that happens. And we can talk about, well, it's a law that's not going to be enforced. It will be enforced if the person can no longer have any other recourse but to do this. Because I've talked to people who've tried to get a hold of people to help resolve the issue before doing this.
Mr. Ronay?
Were you before me,
Yeah.
Dave? I raised my hand, so. I'm with Mr. Bunsness. I'm going to support this again. I've vacillated a little bit because I I did get a couple emails, probably as a result of the mayor's Facebook page. But I don't have that much confidence in the results that you attribute to that page. You know, that's what in politics would be considered a push poll. You state your opinion, and then people say, "Yep, I agree." And I appreciate you doing that, because it's good for us to get input from citizens. But I'm not sure that was a fair representation of really what the community thinks.
Fair enough. It was.
Can I finish?
Sorry.
Thank you, sir. David is right. Our job here is to make decisions and to balance the interests. And in this case, we have interests of folks who want to be able to get out of their driveway. That's an interest that we ought to protect. And we have an interest from folks who want to make sure that they have a parking space. And that's a legitimate interest too. Mr. Rux talks from time to time about maybe we don't need 5 feet, maybe we have 3 feet. I'd be open to that change, to try not to reduce parking any more than necessary, while at the same time protecting the interests of those who need to be able to pull out of their driveway. I showed Dave Lunsman a moment ago a picture. I was at my daughter's house on Saturday, and there was somebody who was parked maybe not right up to her driveway, maybe a foot inside of her driveway, and it kind of shocked me that anybody would do that. But there was a rummage sale, a few houses away, and so they thought that was an exigency that justified parking in that respect. So I'm going to support this as well too. Our job is to try to balance the interests of citizens. If this doesn't work, as I mentioned last week, we can change our mind 2 months from now. We're not married to this.
Dave?
Unlike the mayor, I did not put anything out on Facebook or anything like that, but I did get a lot of emails. So I got people stopping at my house. I got text messages. Every single one of them were negative. Every single one of them said no. I did not there were a couple of them that had misconceptions of what the ordinance read, and even after I clarified that, they were still a no. So I didn't solicit anybody to come to me or anything, but I was very happy that the citizens did contact me and voice their concern also. So as much as I agree with both my council members here, we have to solve problems. Our job is also not to create other problems for other citizens either, and so we have to kind of cut it in the middle and make a decision. Now, granted, each one of us may be passionate about our answers, but that doesn't mean the other person that might vote against or for may not have their own reasons for voting for or against. So we're trying to help each citizen to the best of our abilities, and I do know what you're talking about. I lived in a place that did the exact same thing before too, and I do understand your point. But I also know some other places, cul-de-sacs, some other places with a lot of apartments, maybe by the one-ways, are going to lose parking spaces. I don't care how you cut it, you are going to lose some. So are those people going to be affected also? And do we when somebody comes in and says, we lost 5 parking spaces in my block, do we go and change it for those people? We have to, I think, make a bigger picture here and vote our own conscience, whatever that might be. If it turns out it works out, then so be it. But if it turns out that it's voted down, we just have to respect one another's opinion along with the constituents that contacted us. So you vote whatever you want, but I'm just telling you what came to me.
Mayor, this is Councilman Johnson. Can I have some input?
Please do.
Yeah, I appreciate all the guidance. I think there's been some really great comments so far. I would just like to point out that we've successfully operated our city without an ordinance for all the years preceding now. And we find a situation where we have a concerned citizen stepping forward, and I appreciate those concerns, but I don't want to have a case where something that's been very rare, as in we really don't get other critiques or nothing rises to this level until now, that the tail begins to wag the dog here. I think some of the last comments were really important for us to consider that there's a danger in fixating on this one example And we failed to consider the wide ripple effect that will affect a lot of people, especially in older parts of town. Southwest District, we have a lot of streets and individual addresses, apartments that would be affected. And so we do have to have, the wisdom to oversee the entire potential for consequences here and understand that the pendulum could swing and we could have a large number of backlash of people who will be unhappy. And you just need to consider how serious the problem is. If and when there is a problem, city staff can still be called to intervene without an ordinance. And the citizens, at least that have contacted us, have made it abundantly clear that they do see adverse consequences to them and their neighbors if it were passed. And I received a few emails myself, and they were each of them opposed to the passage of it. And we have smart laws, ordinances that guide us in having, clearance at intersections, parking distance there. And I wholeheartedly support those. I don't support this one. I'll be opposed to it.
Thank you, Alan. Mark, last word.
This, again, is a last resort. He had no other recourse but to come to me and to see if we can't do something about this. So are we saying that if somebody has a similar problem, that they need to call the city and just have Robin come over and paint lines? Is that what we're saying?
Well, prior to this discussion, I didn't realize that was an option. So it's somewhat heartening to figure that,
Is that
that there
something
is
that-
something that's at least available to them.
Call in, either PD or Public Works,
Well, it shouldn't have to be that way. I mean, this is really pretty simple, in my opinion, that it's a last resort type of thing, and I don't think it's going to get used. I don't think it's going to get used that much at all. Only in certain situations where the neighbor is unreasonable. And that happens in Aberdeen. There's some unreasonable people out there, and especially tenants who don't have any skin in the game. They just pay rent, and that's and it's happened to him, and who knows if it's happened to other people too. I've had some calls on it as well, and people are in favor of it. I've talked to several people who are in favor of it because they don't think it's right for a neighbor to disrespect his other neighbor. So I'm going to be for this, and we'll see how it goes.
Sounds good. Carl, let's not belabor this any longer. Would you entertain us with a roll call vote?
Councilmember Rux,
Aye.
Olson,
No.
Bunceness,
Aye.
Johnson,
No.
Rife,
No.
Lunsman,
No.
Ronayne,
Aye.
Remley,
Aye.
Mayor Shonneman.
No, the motion is defeated. We'll move on to ordinance regarding snow removal. That was passed without objection last week. Would you care to speak on that, Ron?
Thank you, Mayor. Again, these are changes, many of them highlighted and addressed following last winter's enormous weather events. The amendments are fairly broad and touch on a number of snow removal efforts, both by the city and by citizens, with respect to the sidewalks in front of them. I can inform the council after the recent discussion that I did not receive any comments from anyone regarding this particular matter.
Need a motion to approve the
Motion
second
to
reading.
approve.
Second.
Motion Olson, second Rux. Carl, can you give me a roll call vote?
Councilmember Remley,
Aye.
Ronayne,
Aye.
Lunsman,
Aye.
Rife, Johnson,
Hello?
Aye.
Bunceness,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Rux,
Aye.
Mayor Shonneman.
Aye, motion carries. We'll move on to the consent calendar. We've got items A through F, routine city business. Can I get a motion to approve the roll consent calendar?
Second.
Motion from Olson, second from Ronayne. Any questions or discussion to be had on the topics contained therein? And nothing. Carl, can I get a roll call vote on that?
Councilmember Rux. Olson.
Aye.
Bunceness.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Rife. Lunsman.
Aye.
Ronayne.
Aye.
Remley.
Aye.
Mayor Shoneman.
Aye, motion does carry. Move on to new business. First item to be observed is an ordinance, first reading, potential first reading. Can I, for rezoning Lot 2, Jensen Rock and Sand, first edition, from I-2 to R3. Can I get a motion?
Moved.
Second.
Second.
Get a motion from Bunceness, a second from Ronayne. Can I get a roll call vote on that? Or actually, let's move to discussion on the matter. Brett, why don't you tell us a little bit about that ordinance?
Pretty easy. The petitioner is requesting this rezoning in order to bring the property into a zoning district that permits residential uses. A variance for lot size and building setback was approved by the Board of Zoning Adjustment on the 13th of June, and the Planning Commission approved this last week. Staff and Planning Commission recommend approval of this rezoning.
Has anyone got any questions? Carl, can I get a roll call vote on that one?
Councilmember Remley.
Aye.
Ronayne.
Aye.
Lunsman.
Aye.
Rife.
Josh, you there?
Johnson.
Aye.
Bunceness.
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Rux.
Aye.
Mayor Shoneman.
Aye, motion does carry. Move on to ordinance to rezone lot, amended zoning regulation in code regarding illuminated and electronic message board signs. So, Brett, why don't you lead off with that?
This ordinance requests in order to remove the separate sign regulations within the Aberdeen Commercial Historic District and create provisions and regulations by which landowners will be able to operate off-premise electronic message board signs as a primary land use. The Aberdeen Commercial Historic District is bordered by 6th Avenue Southeast and Southwest on the south, and Railroad Avenue Southeast and Southwest on the north, and the public alley right-of-way between Main Street South and First Street South on the west, and the public alley right-of-way between Main Street South and Lincoln Street South on the east. This area will no longer have separate regulations for signs and will follow sign regulations for the Central Business District as it had previous to this ordinance. This ordinance amendment was approved by the Aberdeen Planning Commission on July 16th. Staff and Planning Commission recommend approval of this ordinance amendment.
Moved.
Second. And so I've got a motion from Ronayne, a second from Bunceness. There's been discussion on
Olson.
There's been a discussion on tabling this, but since there's so many vested stakeholders here, we thought it would be prudent to have you guys come in and kind of state your case. The one issue that I'm aware of that this ordinance does not address is grandfathering existing sign locations. And I feel like that it's a fair request to include that within the language of this before we read, but I'd be happy to hear you guys out. If one of you guys want to speak to that? Marshall, you've got the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the commission. My name is Marshall Lover, and as many of you know, I'm an attorney from here in Aberdeen, and I represent Lamar Advertising. And with me tonight are Doug Rumka and Allison Carley from Lamar, as well as Roger Brown from Daktronics. For over the last year, we have worked with the city to draft an ordinance that allows digital billboards, while at the same time takes into account public safety and aesthetics. Our goal has been simple: allow the same type of technology that currently exists in Sioux Falls, Rapid City, Mitchell, Watertown, and Brookings to be available in Aberdeen. It's technology that will allow businesses and other organizations more opportunities to market and advertise their products and services. Increased business revenue means increased tax revenue. Increased business also means an increased workforce. Along with the additional marketing channels for businesses, this technology serves the public in times of natural disaster, with weather warnings and road closures. It notifies the public of amber alerts and it can help assist local police and federal authorities in capturing fugitives by sharing current pictures and information. Only digital billboards can provide this kind of community service. This ordinance increases by 600% the distance required between signs. It also mandates that the size of the face of the sign be reduced by 31%. We advocated for those changes. Of the approximately 17 zoning districts, off-premises signs are allowed in only 3 of them: highway commercial, industrial unrestricted, and with special exception, the central business district. Said another way, the only place that these signs are allowed to exist are, generally speaking, along 6th Avenue, near the overpass north to the Ramkota, and the industrial park. To give you some perspective, in the over 3.5 miles between Menards and JR's Furniture on 6th Avenue, there are 3 billboard structures. 3. Importantly, billboards are not allowed in residential areas, and this ordinance does not change where billboards are allowed to exist. It simply says where billboards are currently allowed to exist, they can continue to do so, and they can use newer technology. We support this technology and the efforts to bring this technology to the citizens of Aberdeen. We cannot, however, support this ordinance in its current form, because if this ordinance passes, in our opinion, there is no location where one of these signs could be built without needing a variance. One of the changes to the ordinance will require that an off-premises sign not be located closer than 75 feet to any intersection of public streets, rights-of-way, nor access points, which includes driveways and approaches to a public street. I would encourage you to drive down 6th Avenue and find a location where on 75 feet of each side, there is not a side street, a driveway, or other approach. And so really what this means is if this ordinance in its current form passes, any company that wants to change out its currently existing sign to a digital sign will have to request a variance. Very simply, variances are not easy to get, nor should they be. So assuming this ordinance passes, what does that mean? It means that every existing sign owner, if they want to convert to digital or even just simply rebuild, will be required to seek a variance. If that request is denied, the result will be exactly what you see right now. That is static billboards, because the currently existing signs aren't going anywhere. I mentioned earlier that we support the technology, but we can't support this ordinance in its current form. So what's the solution? Well, our proposal would be that there be an amendment added to this ordinance that allows legal non-conforming signs to be grandfathered in, essentially allows them to keep the same footprint so that if they want to build and put in a digital structure, they can continue to do that, or that they can do that. Rapid City has language in its ordinances that virtually, or that allows for that. In short, we are simply asking that currently existing signs be allowed to retain their footprint if they want to convert to digital. It's a compromise that we submit as fair because, again, regardless of the outcome of the ordinance, the signs that are currently here will continue to be here. We encourage this body to support an amendment with language as suggested. Thank you.
Rob?
If I could, Marshall. So when you're suggesting grandfathering in these existing billboards, so they wouldn't have to be reduced to 275 square feet?
They would.
Okay, I thought you said they would be at the current footprint.
When I mean the current footprint, I mean setbacks relative to streets approaches.
How about the 600-foot distance between them?
They would not necessarily be required to follow that because if there's a currently existing sign that wants to rebuild, there may be another sign that's 500 feet where it's at.
Okay. But there are some areas where we have a fair number of what you refer to as static signs, like at the overpass and so forth. But your thought is all of those could be converted?
Not necessarily, because there's two signs near the overpass that would be too high if those were to be converted.
Okay. Okay, I'm not sure really what rules are carrying, what is being grandfathered in and what isn't. But apparently it has to do with size and height.
Size and height. Otherwise, the physical location where they sit, they get to maintain that without needing to seek a variance.
So under your concept of grandfathering, and if you don't know this, I'm not expecting you to, what proportion of the current signs would be grandfathered in and would be able to be converted to digital?
I don't know the answer,
You folks
Rob.
have to okay.
How many, are you asking how many we would want to
Yeah.
convert?
Well, you want them all, but we've already talked. But how many would be under this grandfathering provision?
I don't know that we wouldn't convert them all at any point. That would be more of a you question, Doug.
We wouldn't even be opposed to having a cap on it where you would allow one per year.
Well,
per sign owner.
and when we talked about 2 for 1. That if you put up one digital sign, you take down 2 static signs. Are you still open to that?
Well, she stated earlier that we have 3 billboards within the city limits from Menards to.
Is that okay? That's all your company has? Okay.
So, no, I wouldn't want to take 2 down to put 1 up.
Sure.
Rob, is your concern that you feel that there's too many billboards in town?
And not everywhere, but my perception is that there are a lot on the overpass, for instance, and frankly, I don't even see them. So maybe there's other places.
They might be gone for all you know.
Maybe so. But I think that was one of the concerns, and that we had when we batted this around a year ago or whenever we got together.
So roughly, what is the cost of upgrading an existing billboard to a digital billboard? In broad numbers.
Broad, 150,000.
150,000. And if the technology improves a lot, does that number get reduced significantly? Or how much of it is actually the LED screen that potentially would go down in cost versus contract labor, electrical, all that sort of stuff?
You probably know more about the cost.
I would say a lot of those economies of scale have already happened. I'm sorry, my name is Roger Brown. I'm with Daktronics. When these signs first came out, we were selling them 400,000, 500,000 for the really large ones. So a lot of the price has already come down.
So the 150 includes the hardware as well as install and the electrical and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah, so ballpark figure is probably 50 for the structure, 100 for the digital phase. Ballpark.
I don't see a huge price drop coming from the points we're at now anymore.
Sure. So that's about the price moving forward. So it's pretty cost prohibitive to be replacing these things.
Oh, yeah.
I talked to the folks from Rapid City, and they said that there's 213 signs within the city limits of Rapid City, which is roughly 2 times the size of Aberdeen. There's, how many, is there 25 structures in Aberdeen, approximately? You guys have 22?
I'd be correct to say this is the language that you were proposing.
That was the copy you handed out at Planning Commission, Marshall.
This would be.
Could we have Brett's overview of the ordinance?
Yeah.
Well, staff is in favor of what we originally worked on with Lamar, what Ron and I and Lynn worked on with them. I'm not in favor of the amendment they have, because currently these are non-conforming signs. And their plan is not to use the actual sign structure. They're gonna take the sign structure down, put up a brand new, all-new sign, new post, new sign face. They're not asking for a permission, I guess, or to amend the ordinance for a non-conforming sign for the size of the sign, the height of the sign. They're asking for the location of the sign, because it's gonna be a brand new sign. Now, this is a structure, just like if it were a building. Now, if somebody has a non-conforming building and it gets removed, it doesn't get to be built back in the same location it was before. It needs to meet the current ordinance. And that's our feeling with the signs. If we open up this door with signs, does that open up the door with the rest of the structures in town? That's our concern.
Do you have go ahead, Clint.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, do you have a sense of the 75-foot setback that Marshall brought to my attention? When I talked to the guys in Rapid City, they said their setback is literally 0 feet, so long as the sign had a clearance of 10 feet from the ground. Do you have a sense of other communities aside from Aberdeen and Rapid? Is it somewhere in between? Is it 0? Is it 75?
I guess I'm gonna look at Ron on this, since we worked on it together. I think it was something I believe the city manager had found because of something that he had brought up, that 75 feet.
Because that would be the other alternative, possibly, would be to adjust the variances within the same ordinance to allow for those things to be compliant rather than to make exceptions for the non-compliance, if that's the big concern of this part of the city.
And another thing the council needs to realize is Mr. Lovern said there isn't any place in town that one of these could be put. The way the ordinance is written, these are a separate business, a commercial business. So the ordinance is written that they can be put on a commercial lot. This meaning you have to have a lot as if you were having a business. That lot needs to be the same size for that business as it would for the sign for the business. So they can be put in town. They just have to find that piece of property, purchase it just like any other business does, and put their sign up.
Go ahead, Dave.
So, Brett, is this something that communities do typically, or are we the only community that's would have language like this?
I guess I can't specify a community off the top of my head that has language like this. Like I said, we've been working on this for a year, so there's some things that I knew a year ago that have kind of drifted off.
Could I speak on that? This was the one issue in that year we weren't talking about, if you recall. We weren't comparing whether other communities were having changes in their language regarding non-conforming signs. We were spending time working with Lamar on these various specifics that you're seeing throughout the document that's in front of you. The non-conforming sign language did not come up until we had agreed on all this stuff. And the answer to that was we weren't in support of allowing these to be applied to non-conforming signs, and that was it. That's been the end of that discussion, the end of that research. So if the council is leaning towards a non-conforming sign language, that's fine. We would just like to look at what other cities are doing and propose that. That did not come in front of the planning commission in a timely way, and has not been timely addressed with us.
So the language that's on your screen came directly from Rapid City, with the minor scratch exception. Mr. Ronay?
Thank you, Mayor. I have another question for Ron. You know, we've got that section 60-286 that is in one of the recitals. It requires that the planning commission pass something before we can pass it. Does that mean that we can't amend what they have done?
No, and I
don't read that either.
I will
Okay.
make sure that the council is aware that the planning commission acts as the gatekeeper for the general notion of it. And they have done that, and that was properly noticed and published, and they properly addressed it and dealt with this particular ordinance. But at this point, the council is free to make changes as it sees fit.
Thank you.
So aside from Rob feeling that there's too many signs in congested areas, are there other issues that people have with replacing? Clint?
Well, my main thing is because dealing with state law and numerous times throughout the day, they don't really recognize grandfather either. If you're basically, like I say, this grandfather clause bothers me, because if you were keeping the same pole, same everything, yeah, it's not so bad, and you just want to put a digital thing on it, we can talk about that. But if you want to replace everything, that sort of precludes the notion of a grandfather, because you're making the changes, you're changing everything out on it. It no longer falls under a grandfather clause. As far as signs go, do you guys own the ones on Dakota Street?
By the storage units?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Because, like I say, there are certain areas where I think, because I don't know if many of you know, but several weeks ago, the sign out in front of Buffalo Wings and Rings had their dimmer assembly probably go bad, and you could see that thing all the way past the airport, bright as day at night. And like I say, I'm open to having some of these signs around. I'm not totally opposed to it. It's a wave of the future. I drive to a lot of communities. You see these, but boy, imagine if a dimmer control went out, right next to a residential area. I mean, that's where it is for me, where I can see the benefit of having some of these signs in certain locations, but I can't see them for every location. And I think the one hang up is the one over by Cartney Bearing. I'm guessing is one that you guys would like to see some change. Like I say, for me, I'd have to take a look at it. I was talking with Ron, and like I say, I'm not against tabling it tonight because I was throwing out ideas too, and I just haven't had time to explore them. But like I say, there are still certain areas where I would not want to see these signs. Certain areas I think they'd be perfectly fine. Certain areas that they wouldn't. And how do I work that out? So.
Hey Travis, I have a question.
Go ahead, Josh.
My question is for Marshall. Without the grandfathering clause added back in, are there any locations in town where you could put up a digital sign?
I guess I don't know the answer to that, Josh. I mean, it would be very, very difficult, based on the way this proposed ordinance, if passed, would apply.
Primarily because of setbacks, right?
Correct, and distance requirements from approaches and things of that nature. If I may respond to Mr. Rux's comments about Buffalo Wings and Rings, that is an on-premises sign.
It is, but it's a similar technology.
And when we worked with the city on drafting this, we wanted to include a penalty provision that would allow the city, rightfully so, if one of these signs, for lack of a better description, goes berserk, that the city has the ability to go in and monitor and control and shut that down. So,
and I only use that as an example because it is a similar sign to what you guys are talking about. Because I see them. I've been to Fargo. I've been to Sioux Falls where they have all these going on, and they do, I think, sometimes look better than the static signs. But at the same point, if the technology doesn't work, and we all know what happens when technology doesn't work, boy, there are certain areas where I would not want to have basically a floodlight flashing in my window all night. So, but you're right, and I agree with the penalty part of it. I really do, and means of access to be able to access it, that type of stuff. I agree with those types of things. But again, that was just used as an example of what your technology looks similar to, and how bright it is during the day, and how bright it can be at night should the technology fail.
mm-hmm. We've never wanted to be adversaries with the city on this. We've always wanted to be partners. And so to the extent that this council decides you want some sort of language in there that allows, and I'm using the term loosely, grandfathering in, we'd be happy to work with your planning and zoning director as well as the city attorney. So I'm just offering that for your consideration.
Mark, have you got a question?
Yeah, I need to learn more about this. I move we table it for at least a week.
Second.
We've got a move to table for a week from Mark Remley, second from Ronayne. Carl, can I get a roll call on that?
Councilmember Rux.
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Bunceness.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Reif.
Josh, you there?
Aye.
Lunsman.
Aye.
Ronayne.
Aye.
Remley.
Aye.
Mayor Shoneman.
Aye. Motion has been tabled for a week. We'll see you on Monday if you guys care to come. We should have some additional considerations at that point. Next item, ordinance to rezone Lot 1, Jensen Rock and Sand, First Edition from C1 to I2. Brett, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Property is located 911 8th Street South. The petition is requesting the rezoning in order to eliminate split zoning on the lot that was created as a result of platting. Planning Commission approved this last week. Staff and Planning Commission recommend approval of this rezoning.
Move approval.
Second.
Got a motion from Rux and a second from Olson. Carl, can I get a roll call vote?
Councilmember Remley.
Aye.
Ronayne.
Aye.
Lunsman.
Aye.
Rife.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Bunceness.
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Rux.
Aye.
Mayor Shoneman.
Aye, motion does carry. Next item, hearing on retail on-off sale malt beverage and South Dakota wine and retail on-off sale for Tokyo Sushi and Steakhouse. I learned to read here and we'll be moving along. Carl, would you tell us a little bit about that malt beverage license?
This is for a new malt beverage and South Dakota Farm wine and retail for the address as indicated. All of the staff recommendations have gone through, all the staff approvals so far have gone through.
Move to approve.
Second.
Got a motion to approve from Remley and a second from Ronayne. Carl, would you give us a roll call?
Councilmember Rux.
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Bunceness.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Rife.
Aye.
Lunsman.
Aye.
Ronayne.
Aye.
Remley.
Aye.
Mayor Shoneman.
Aye, that motion passes. The next order of business is to direct the Planning and Zoning Department to designate the 6th Avenue address for possible approval. That seems like it was copied and pasted twice for Family Dental Care Office.
Move approval.
Second.
We've got a motion from Bunceness and a second from Remley. I would ask for a roll call vote. Carl? Oh, any discussion on the matter?
I would oppose that.
Okay.
Just because of what I know about emergency services, okay? And I can understand why they would like the 6th Avenue address and advertising and all of that, but currently there's no openings on 6th Avenue. I think it would create additional danger on 6th Avenue when Klein Street already offers access. So I would oppose this.
Sure, and you were on the phone last week, so I don't know if you heard the entire discussion. I appreciate your input there. I think that was one of the big concerns that the city really brought forward. Any other input or feedback, questions on this matter? Any other council members?
May I just talk about this in a broader way? The Planning and Zoning Department for many years, since the 911 system came into being, has been utilizing, it's called the South Dakota Rural Addressing Procedural Handbook, as a policy to do address designations. And Lynn and I had a conversation this morning about operational versus policy. And I think as part of the council's consideration on this particular request is whether that policy is something that needs to be revisited. You know, the handbook is pretty clear on how we're to do these things. But if the council is now wanting to establish some new criteria for the policy of designating addresses, again, that's fine, that's within your purview, but it's something that planning and zoning should need so that they can move forward in the future on doing these address designations. And there is this entire handbook, and I know it's not a lot of fun, but that's what they follow to do these designations. And I just wanted the council to keep that in mind, that as it approves or does not approve the motion before it, the policy itself is not one that's been established by the council. It's been one that's been utilized for many years by planning and zoning, but you may want to consider then, if you think that the policy needs to be changed, you may want to consider identifying and providing criteria for planning and zoning in the future.
Glenn, what have you got?
Well, just that me and Dave have been on here, 14 years? And this is the first time I've ever had this. So I don't think it's if it starts happening, I think we need to look at changing our policy. But like I say, 14 years, this is one, and I don't know if we had any before that. So
I think we had some law enforcement input that pretty much across the board, a policeman will probably pretty easily be able to figure out where this place is. It's a half a block on 6th Avenue. Is a pretty good size location.
I'd like to get Brett's opinion.
Yeah, Brett, what have you got?
Well, I can't say we've had people have come to the board with this request. They've come to us and we've explained to them the policy that we use. Now, I'm not saying that you're not going to have more people show up if you give one. I don't know. You might not. And I do want to point out, I hope that you all received the email from the fire marshal and the fire department, who are also against this request.
Mayor, may I give input?
Please do. Alan, what have you got?
Yeah, I'm just thinking that there's no real new muscle memory that needs to occur here. The location is the same, obviously, as the previous library, and the parking lot access was the same for the library as it will be for the new dental office. So we're talking a space of about 5 total blocks for law enforcement, first responders to come. We're not exactly Manhattan, so I appreciate the points that are made by city staff, but I think it's sensible that we move forward and allow this.
Thank you. David? Or Alan? Sorry. Can't see your face. Anybody else have any input? Maybe we'll buy ourselves a minute or two for Remley to return. I'm assuming he didn't abandon this meeting. Mr. Lunsman, what have you got?
I can make something up.
Go for it. You've got 45 seconds to kill.
Mr. Mayor, if we vote in favor of this, that would allow them to be addressed off of 6th Avenue, and they'd have to create access off of 6th Avenue?
No, it'll just be a superficial address.
Okay.
And I would assume for marketing purposes and for visibility and just for one to say that they've got an address on the most traffic location. In previous discussions, it sounded like a few other people had pretty recently asked because of new street designations and so forth, streets that have been created that aren't even on Google Maps and so forth, but they never found their way to the council and nobody had any input from our perspective on that. So I'll ask for a motion to approve the address change.
We have a motion.
Already have it.
Yep.
I made the motion.
Oh, well, we're in good shape then. I'll just have about a roll call vote from Carl and see how this thing sorts out.
Councilmember Remley.
Aye.
Ronayne.
Aye.
Lunsman.
Aye.
Rife.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Bunceness.
Aye.
Olson.
No.
Rux.
Aye.
Mayor Shoneman.
Aye. Motion does pass. Next item we've got is a contract with SRF Consulting Group for coordinating plan for ride line, possible approval.
Skipped item F.
Oh,
Item F.
I skipped the most important one of the day. Sorry, wife. My beautiful wife is in the crowd to present that one, but I already marked it. So, next item. Sorry, the Safe Harbor Foundation request for permission to place a purple toilet and signage on properties throughout Aberdeen during the month of August as a fundraising campaign effort. Brett, what do you have from the city side on that?
Well, I think you pretty much explained it there. The campaign is called Potty with a Purpose, and I chuckle every time I read it. They're running through the month of August. They want to plan on putting this toilet in people's yards with a sign explaining why it's there to try and raise funds. And once somebody pays to have the toilet removed, it can get sent to somebody else, or Safe Harbor will choose where to put it. Currently, our nuisance ordinance does not permit toilets out in the yard, nor does it permit portable signage. Staff does recommend approval of this just for the purpose of Safe Harbor and for their fundraising campaign and for the month of August alone.
Kelly, you've got the floor.
I think that Brett summed it up pretty good, but we're hoping that people have a good sense of humor about it, and we're certainly willing to be very accommodating. There's going to be a website on the sign that accompanies the Purple Potty, so they know where they can go to take whatever actions they want to take. Hopefully it is a donation, but obviously we understand not everybody will maybe be as good-hearted about it as we're hoping, and we're more than happy to get that potty off their lawn as quickly as possible. And I'll be personally triaging, so I'm pretty accessible to go grab it if I need to. And the intention is that we would remove it within 24 hours. Our goal is to do it more quickly than that, because the more times we can move it, the more money that we can make. So we are definitely motivated to keep it moving along. But
Move to approve.
Second.
A motion from Ronayne and a second from Clint Rux. Can I get a roll call vote on that?
Well,
sorry,
question.
go ahead, David.
So when you hung the pants on the overpass, I think you had individuals write a message.
Yep.
Is there some message with this purple toilet that we're trying to promote Safe Harbor with?
So purple alone is the color for domestic abuse. or domestic violence. And our goal is just more awareness of who Safe Harbor is. And so we're asking people to engage on social media with a hashtag. So it's not a testimonial from anybody like the pants were, but it's really just an effort to create some awareness that we have this organization and that we need community support.
Thank you.
And there's been other communities that have inevitably done this, so we're not the groundbreaker on this.
I'd like to take credit, but we're not.
Sounds good. Any other questions or discussion to be had from council members? Carl, I'll ask for a roll call vote on this one.
Councilmember Rux.
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Bunceness.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Rife.
Aye.
Lunsman.
Aye.
Ronayne.
Aye.
Remley.
Abstain.
Mayor Shoneman.
I also will abstain due to my wife presenting here today, but the motion does pass.
Thanks, guys.
Next item that we've got is the contract with SRF Consulting for the coordination plan for Ride Line, possible approval and authorization for the city manager to sign a contract with that group. Tom, what have you got for us?
Basically, the coordination plan is a requirement from the state of South Dakota that we do every 5 years. They did give us a one-year extension on it due to some things that were happening last year, so we're actually in our 6th year. The coordination plan is basically a plan that we hire out, in our case, looking at hiring out to a consulting firm to conduct public meetings, to get input on what we can do to better our service for the elderly and disabled folks here in Aberdeen, along with anyone else that uses Ride Line services. Basically, a way to find out what we can do to be better than what we already are. We put it out originally as a request for proposal, didn't get any response on that, and then the state then offered us the opportunity to say, go out for requests for bids. We received one bid from the SRF company. They are the ones that did the last coordination plan for us, so they're familiar with our services, so we're hoping that it will be a very smooth coordination plan.
Move approval.
Second.
I've got a motion from Bunceness and a second from Lunsman. Can I get a roll call vote on that, Carl?
Councilmember Remley.
Aye.
Ronayne.
Aye.
Lunsman.
Aye.
Rife.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Bunceness.
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Aye.
Rux. Mayor Shoneman.
Aye, that motion does pass. I'd like the next item for consideration is payment of a bunch of bills for the week of July 22nd, 2019. Can I entertain a motion for the payment of those bills?
Move approval.
Second.
I have a motion from Olson and a second from Remley. Any discussion on any of those particular line items from anybody? And Carl, can you give me a roll call vote on that one?
Councilmember Rux.
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Bunceness.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Rife.
Aye.
Lunsman.
Aye.
Ronayne.
Aye.
Remley.
Aye.
Mayor Shoneman.
Aye. Bills will continue to be paid. Next item we have is payroll approval for period July 7th through July 20th, along with the Social Security, Old Age, Survivors Insurance, Retirement, Health, and Life Insurance. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion from Ronayne and a second from, I believe it was Clint Rux. Can I get a roll call vote on that one, Carl?
Councilmember Remley.
Aye.
Ronayne.
Aye.
Lunsman.
Aye.
Rife.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Bunceness.
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Rux.
Aye.
Mayor Shoneman.
Aye. Motion does carry. Next, we have the city manager's report. Lynn, what have you got for us this week?
I have no oral report this evening.
Is it because we took too long on everything else?
I was looking at the clock.
I'm not going to get to see myself on KSFY, so imagine how I feel. Get a motion for adjournment on this
No,
meeting.
not yet, not yet. Just want to remind the council members that you received in your email a packet regarding the charter changes that the subcommittee is proposing. So encourage you to open that up, take a look. A lot of it is not worth reading because it's grammatical errors and all this and that. But there is one particular area under council salaries that you should look at that and be familiar with that. Because in about 2 weeks, 3 weeks, we're going to bring that up for discussion. Is that correct? Ron?
We're gonna bring up the general concept of how to approach the presentation of this to the
Community.
community.
So the charter amendment, we have to, for these changes, we have to go to a vote of the people. So that's why it's important that you read this.
Did it take you a long time for the grammatical errors?
Well,
'Cause there was a lot.
Rob and I will not take any credit for the work that's done on this, this piece, although we believe it's done well. Ron drove the process, so thank you, Ron.
The highlight is salaries, though. That's what to be looking for.
I would,
There were
that
some other changes in there too.
might be the only controversial piece to the whole thing is in the salary section, so.
It's always popular when U.S. Congress does it. I'll tell you that much.
Well, we've had our struggles over the years with salary also, but, so we're
Well,
gonna
I
leave it
for
up
one
to,
will.
we're gonna leave it up to the council to decide.
Congress gets more raises than we have, though. And even the legislators have gotten more raises than we have.
I believe you guys are underpaid, so you've got my vote of confidence on that one. Can I?
I forgot to mention this, just so you're prepared, I am going to make the budget presentation the next meeting. So we may be here just as long next week as we were here this evening.
Can I get a motion for
Moved.
adjournment? Second. Got a motion. Bunsen, and a second from Ronayne. Can I get a roll call on adjournment?
Councilmember Rux?
Aye.
Olson?
Aye.
Bunceness?
Aye.
Johnson?
Aye.
Rife? Lunsman?
Aye.
Ronayne?
Aye.
Remley?
Aye.
Mayor Shonneman?
Aye, we are adjourned.